Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in marketing to technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues and industry friends of mine who will stop by to tell you their stories. And my goal is that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a quick shout out to TREW Marketing. TREW is a content marketing agency based in beautiful Austin, Texas, and serves companies focused in technical industries. For more information, visit TREWmarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Well, today I'm joined by Lance Looper, Brand and Content Strategy Director at TREW Marketing. Welcome to the show, Lance.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm so happy to be here.
Before we jump into our topic today, let's talk a bit about you and your background in all things content marketing.
Yeah, so timing has played a big part of my career. Starting when I started my career in 2000, I went into public relations right out of school. I started my career at Weber Shandwick in Dallas. And in 2000, we were starting to see the convergence of digital and print media. So a lot of media properties were starting to go exclusively online. And that was really when people started to have this hunger for content. People started to realize the power of the internet. And so they wanted to be on the web when people were searching for certain things. And so at Weber Shandwick, I learned a lot about technology marketing, and that was where I sort of gravitated towards the writing side of things. And so from there, I've found myself working with technology clients and customers, and it was something that I had a knack for. And because of living in Austin and working with the clients that I do, there's no shortage of opportunities for writing technical content. And I have had the opportunity to sort of split my career evenly between PR and marketing writing and actually copywriting, like on the creative side. So I've had the benefit of sort of having both sides, but mainly in the service of technology customers.
A glutton for punishment, many writers would think.
A lot of people would think that. I think I might be an outlier there. I would prefer technical audiences.
Yeah. And then, of course, our paths briefly crossed at a little company called National Instruments.
Yeah, in 2005, I joined National Instruments, and that was where my technical education began in earnest. So NI is a test and measurement company, run by engineers, founded by engineers, in the service of engineers, trying to solve very complicated problems that are only going to be solved by engineering. And so I was there for 10 years. And over the course of the 10 years, I managed the PR writing team. So I had a team that was dedicated to just writing news releases. I managed our case studies process, which was interviewing customers and developing content to highlight what our customers are doing with our tools. Towards the end of my time there, the last 5 or 6 years I was there, I managed the writing of the creative design group. So all of our advertising and our video production. So NI gave me the opportunity to sort of develop this sort of well-rounded approach to writing. There wasn't much that I wasn't able to do in terms of media types, social media, video production. We did a lot of print ads, so I did a ton of print ads. So my time at NI was rewarding because I got to do a lot of different things, and it was sort of where I developed my ability to work with subject matter experts and understood the value of having resources that you could go to help source very technical content.
I know you also took a brief stint, maybe not so brief, in the financial industry. What were some of the differences between working with engineering audiences and financial?
Yeah, that was actually a very stark difference and a difference that I wasn't fully prepared for. And the biggest difference was the velocity of the opportunities. Coming from working with clients like Texas Instruments and Silicon Labs and National Instruments, these are opportunities that take quarters or years to develop. The financial technology service was an opportunity that might be 6 days. Like our
Oh,
average,
wow.
our average sales cycle was measured in days. It might have been a couple of weeks at the very end. So that was something that takes a completely different skill set, to engage an audience over the course of a few minutes, whereas I've always had the challenge of taking very technical content and making it digestible and consumable for maybe a little bit broader of an audience. My task was in the financial services sector was to meet a need and to explain the urgency of the product we were selling and instilling a sense of urgency in the prospect. So it was a completely different animal. And some of the things that I learned was the audiences aren't terribly different. The company that I was with was Affinipay, and one of their products was LawPay, and it was in the service of lawyers. And lawyers and engineers sort of operate at the same level. They are experts in what they do, and they exist to do that thing. They're to fulfill a service. And so things like technical writing and anything that's not germane to their domain expertise is secondary. And being able to bring a service to both audiences is something that both find value in, but the way you do that is very different. So white papers for financial tech was not something that we used a lot. They had their place, but not in the same way that an engineer is going to download a white paper and spend some really quality time with it in order to make them better at their jobs. So it was mainly an awareness and less of an education angle.
That's a remarkable difference indeed.
Yep.
So I'm so thrilled to be reunited with you now at TREW Marketing. So briefly, just tell our listeners what you do today for TREW.
Yeah, so my job is brand and content management. So I work with our clients, mainly technical and an engineering audience, to help distill their brand voice into what are the things that they want to offer the world and how do they want to talk about themselves. So we do brand positioning, and I'll spend time with them to talk about what are the aspects of their company that they want to come through in their brand values, their voice, like how do they want to talk to audiences, what are the challenges that they're here to solve. And through that process, they start to realize these are the things that we stand for and these are the things that we offer. And as that can start to come through in the things that we develop for them, content, brand strategy, media strategy, executive visibility, then they start to really be able to sort of rally around what they are as a company. And in some of these companies, it's a conversation that they haven't had before. They're focused on servicing their customers, and they haven't been able to give the attention that they need to their brand. And so they've come to this point where they're like, our brand needs work. It's sort of underserviced, and we want to make sure that we're getting the value out of it that we need. Current events being what they are, I think a lot of companies are taking this opportunity of quarantine to take a critical look at some things that they haven't before. So nobody's going to trade shows, and there's a lot of travel that's not happening that would otherwise keep people from doing some of these things. So a lot of the blocking and tackling is happening right now on a lot of brand strategies that I think works to the benefit of marketing organizations. And marketing, I think, as an industry is kind of having a moment right now. It's been great to see, everybody has a crisis plan. And I've never worked for a company that didn't have a crisis management plan, and then having the opportunity for everyone to put theirs in place at the same time. A lot of industries are stubbing their toes right now, but marketing is not one of them.
Wonderful. Oh, I can think of quite a few of smaller companies that I know that didn't have a crisis plan in place, but it's been fun helping them to quickly develop one. Like what you said about everyone putting it into action at the same time, pretty incredible.
Yeah. It's
Well,
been an interesting figure looking at the conversations. Everybody's having a conversation of should we comment on COVID-19?
right.
And at first you're like, well, I'm an engineering company, maybe not, or I'm a financial technology company, maybe not. But then, when shelter in place happened and it became something that there was everyone was touched by it, then everyone was like, we need to explain how this is touching our customers. And I have been really impressed with a lot of the campaigns that I've seen as a result of it.
Me too. Me too. Well, let's jump into our topic today. So, our focus is on the brave writer, such as yourself, who's been thrust or chosen a technical field and asked to produce content that's engaging, content that's deeply technical, and of course, perfectly accurate. And I'm in awe of you and the others who've chosen this profession because it is not for the faint of heart. So having obviously managed teams of writers and been a writer yourself in deeply technical industries, what traits do best-in-class writers share?
Well, one thing that I like to start with is a writer that is familiar with the inverted pyramid. The thing we all learned in our composition class. Being able to organize content into what's most important is really key, especially for a technical audience. Somebody is coming to your content from a technical perspective because they need to solve a problem. And the faster that they can solve that problem, the better your content is. You need to get the issue up front right away. We get caught up on how much time they spend with our content, and that's a valid, metric. But the best content that I interact with is something that gives me the answer and then is gone. So being able to organize the content is really important. For technical content in particular, I look for writers that are good conversationalists. And that's because generally a writer will have an opportunity when they're talking to a technical audience to work with a subject matter expert. And that relationship with the subject matter expert is sort of the beginning and the end of how good the content is going to be in the end. And so a writer that can carry on a conversation and sort of get to the heart of the story with the SME is really important. I think that sort of SME writer relationship can't be overstated. And one of the things that comes through in that relationship is you'll have a lot of conversations and you'll want to pick up on the vocabulary that the SME uses, or the analogies that they use, or the things that make them who they are. A lot of people can take a topic and write about it and make it sound like a company wrote it. But it's a little bit different to make it sound like that person wrote it. And what I like about working with a technical subject matter expert is when they get something back and they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like I wrote it, but there's no way I could have done that. So thank you for helping me with whatever that barrier was. It might have been time. It might have been that they've tried and they just couldn't get it to come across the way they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so having those conversations, they can tell you what they want, but they just haven't been able to sit down and do it. And so I like writers that can hold a conversation and pull out the story from the SME, and then being able to organize everything and present it back in a way that reflects what the SME had in mind to begin with.
And it's their voice. Wow, that takes talent. Something that I often hear when I talk to prospects that are interested in hiring TREW Marketing for writing is they want to find a writer that at least has had exposure to their industry. They're not expecting them to be an expert and all of that, but someone recently mentioned, I want them to know that when they hear specifications for this product and the numbers are high, they need to know, is that good or bad? Or they need to understand some basic acronyms so that we're not just having to explain everything from scratch. And I could see where that's a shorthand, a conversation to have, and the strength of that writer. But of course, on the other hand, it's very difficult to have across all the industries and applications within the engineering space.
Yep. That's right. And there's a lot of great resources out there for the writer who has been given an assignment that finds them out of their depth. Like IEEE has a bunch of great resources. If you are on the hook for something that is completely foreign to you, they're a great resource for searching for it and then finding a lot of content about it so you can get at least a working understanding. Another trick that I developed for addressing that issue is the more you can hear people have conversations about something, the better. So there's been a couple of times when recently, so I'm new to TREW within the last couple of months, and so there's been some topics that I'm like, oh, I need to educate myself on that. I could read a bunch of stuff, but the real value I've found is hearing people talk about it. So I'll go to YouTube or LinkedIn and find a talk or a presentation or a roundtable on that topic, and I'll just listen to the people talk about it, because that's where it really comes through and where that personality comes through. And when you hear things like how specs are used, or what the what a factor of measurement is, hearing them in the acronyms in real life is much more valuable than just trying to bone up by reading.
Oh, absolutely. That's great advice. And I think about the resourcefulness and how thorough that is to proactively go out and do that. And I contrast that against, there's companies out there that are basically referred to as content mills, where you have maybe college students or grad students or maybe new grads that are just there to churn out a lot of words for a very small price. And what you sacrifice there is that attention to detail and that thoroughness. So something, I guess, for our listeners to know if they're debating about different models of how to hire a writer is be wary of that model if they don't work with technical companies successfully.
Yeah, there's few things more frustrating than searching for something that you need an answer to, and then finding something with a title that gives you the expectation this is going to meet my needs, and then having to read for 1,500 words before they get to the point.
Oh.
And so like writing for words, or just generating content for SEO's sake, is easy to fall into that trap.
Well, and think about that person's opinion of the company's brand. I imagine they're less inclined to want to work with them after that experience. Yeah. Well, you mentioned subject matter experts. So let's talk about these important partners to the writer. What is their typical day job, so to speak, at a technical company? And are they excited to speak with you, Lance, when you collaborate with them?
Yeah, generally they're very excited, because they're first and foremost, they're experts in whatever their job is, and because of that, their time is valuable. So they're pulled in a lot of different directions. They're managing a business unit, or maybe they're managing the company, or they're a product marketing manager and they have a portfolio of products that they've got their eye on. So their time is valuable, and being able to work with a writer is a privilege for them, and they're generally very excited. And they want it to be a productive conversation. It usually starts with a sourcing session, and it's the responsibility of the writer to plan and execute an effective sourcing session, and it's a responsibility of the SME to be open and candid and to answer the writer's questions in as many ways as the writer sees fit. I'll ask the same question a couple of different times if it's a particularly technical topic, because I want to hear a few different ways. Like, I don't want the prescriptive way, and I don't want the way that he or she might explain it to a colleague. What I want is something in the middle. I want it to be digestible for whoever may consume the content. It's not necessarily distilling it down into lay terms, but I want it to be conversational. And so working with SMEs, they're generally very forthcoming and excited about it, because you're helping them solve a problem that they haven't been able to on their own. They've tried writing it. I've met some SMEs that are fantastic writers, but I've met others that are brilliant, but when it comes to writing it down, they just don't have the time, or they just haven't been able to find their voice. And so the opportunity to work with a writer is something that generally gets them very excited.
I imagine so. Like, yay, I don't have to write this myself. Blank page syndrome or
Yeah,
whatnot.
that's exactly right. And for engineering companies that I've worked with, getting published is it's a badge of honor. And they want to be able to do it. It brings some credibility, and sometimes within the organization there are financial incentives to getting published, and so it's something that they want to do, but because of different pressures put on them, or they just don't, it's not a skill set that they don't have, they'll bend over backwards to help them get something published.
Awesome. And you're right. I mean, they're proud to have information out in the world published with their name on it. And marketing can also tell them how popular that content is and what impact it's making on the business to further excite them to do more of it. So,
Yep.
yeah. Well, let's talk about this sourcing session in more detail. How do you know if you've extracted enough information to actually develop your white paper, case study, or whatever piece of content that is that you're working on?
That's a great question, and something that I don't think gets talked about enough. This is something that every writer will face. There comes a point when they have to sit down and start writing. So how do you know when you're ready to do that? And my sort of barometer for that is, if I can have a conversation from beginning, middle to end about the topic, then I'm probably ready to sit down and start writing it. And so what I mean by that is, if I know what the challenge is and what the solution is, it's sort of like the who, what, how, and why. If I know those things and I can talk to them, if I can have a conversation in my head where I can articulate those things in a few minutes, I probably have enough information to get started. If you have an engaged subject matter expert that's willing to spend an hour with you, an hour with a subject matter expert with a well-planned, engaged sourcing session, you can create, there's really no shortage of what you can create. So if you're doing a blog post or a white paper, you likely have the information that you need. So I would say if you have a grasp on a beginning, middle, and end, then you're probably ready to get started. And then as you're going through the process, one of the traps that writers sort of fall into is it's hard to know which rabbit trails to follow and which to leave alone. And so a lot of times my first draft will include a lot of those questions. Like, hey, this is really interesting. You said this twice. Is this something that we should chase down? Or, hey, you mentioned this, but I couldn't really tell from our conversation if it was sort of a one-off comment or if it's germane to the topic. So my recommendation is to leave it out. But if you want it, this is the context in which I think it would fit. So my first draft is loaded with notes on things that I heard that may be relevant, may not be relevant, but I generally have all of those elements of a challenge, a solution, a resolution. But don't be afraid. I would encourage writers to not be afraid of a first draft that is embellished with notes and questions to sort of drill in a little bit deeper. The one thing you don't want to do is get to the final product and anyone in the approval chain says this is something that any one of our competitors could have written.
Ooh, no.
What are the things that only we can say about this? And again, that's sort of the writer's responsibility to draw it out of the SME, and that could be a little bit uncomfortable for the SME because they're speaking very boldly about the company and the company's capabilities. But I would say if you have that, then you're pretty well set. If you can organize your thoughts into the beginning, the middle, and the end, have a reasonable, explain it reasonably in a couple of minutes to yourself or someone, and you can speak to the key value proposition that your company, the company that you're representing, brings, then you're in pretty good shape.
You mentioned this filtering process, and I imagine That must be so important because you have this SME that's super excited about their technology, their solution, whatever it is, and they just want to tell you all sorts of things about it that may be, like you said, not germane to the focus of the particular piece. So being very, I guess, sensitive to their excitement, but also keeping things on track. It's kind of a fine line to balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where the relationship sort of comes in, like being able to spend time with them and to pick up on the things that excite them and the things that that they are saying because they think that they have to, or because it's part of the company sort of positioning statement. Um, I think that the going back to the writer SME relationship can go a long way towards answering some of those questions and smoothing that sort of filtering process out.
Great. Well, you also talked about connecting this piece to the overall message of the company or the campaign, and I wanted to let you know. I don't know. I think maybe you heard this already, but one of my recent podcast episodes featured a guest, Peter Matthews from Knowles Precision Devices, and his role is he's a technical marketing manager. So he's not a writer, but he often interacts in this process, in the sourcing sessions, or helps the writer prepare for the sourcing sessions by connecting the overall messaging of the company or the campaign theme to why this piece exists, how it's going to be used, and just give more context around the project. And I imagine that that's pretty valuable to you.
Yeah, I like Peter's analogy of a referee in the process. Um, that's definitely a luxury to have. It's a luxury to have even a writer in the process. If you can have a writer and someone from the larger marketing organization to sort of help shape the piece, that is an opportunity that should not be passed up, and it should not be taken lightly. I think that there is value in that sort of process and having more people involved. I think that there's a lot to be said about making sure that the SME and the writer are very happy with it, just the two of them, before it finds any life outside of them. Because the writer and the SME at that point have to be able to defend it. Why did we write this? Why did we say this? How do we back this up? It needs to go through some pretty good internal vetting just between them two to make sure that they're happy with it. Because the more people get involved, the more things are going to get, people want to put their fingerprints on things, especially if it's a high profile topic, or if it's an industry trend that's getting a lot of attention right now. Everybody's going to want to sort of say, ooh, what are we saying about that? What are we saying about Bluetooth angle of arrival? I want to read that. And so if the writer and the SME are shaky on the piece when it leaves sort of their possession, then it opens it up for a lot more input from people that may just have a casual interest. But I am all for bringing other people into the process, as long as the writer has a good control over it.
That makes sense. Okay. So when it comes to actually writing the piece itself, I'm really curious about this. Are there any tools or reference guides? You mentioned IEEE earlier as a great reference, just to make sure that your writing is on par. And you'll laugh at me, Lance, but I hold a journalism degree from Texas A&M, but I was there back in the 90s, and the AP style book was all like the Bible. And I have a feeling things have come a long way since then.
I have an AP style guide within arm's reach all the time. An old fashioned print book that I flip through, and there are certain sections that I go to all the time. I think that is just a good tool for any writer. Another really good resource, and this goes way back, is there's I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, but Newton's Telecom Dictionary was big in like the early 2000s, and it was basically any acronym for at the time, everything was this convergence of connectivity was happening, and so everybody was sort of learning about all these protocols and standards, and this was a 1,000-page volume that just explained all of those things. So if you come across a term, Newton's Telecom Dictionary was something that I used a lot. But there's a couple of publications that IEEE has that are great resources. A lot of times I'll do a sourcing session and I record them. I would recommend doing that because it's really hard for me to take notes and have a conversation. And a lot of times when I'm doing that, I'll go back and I'm transcribing the conversation, and the subject matter expert or the person that I'm talking to will say something that I can't tell what it is. Like I just can't tell what it is. So I've written it down, and a lot of times it's an acronym, and they've either said the acronym phonetically or they've said it and it's something that I've never heard of. And if you haven't heard an acronym before, and the first time you're hearing it instead of reading it, it's a little bit disorienting. And so
Sure.
there is a lot of technology companies have acronym libraries. National Instruments had one that was very useful. So there's a couple that I have that I can share that it's just a really good resource for those things that come up from time to time that you're like, I need to educate myself on this certain wireless standard, or what does this 6-letter acronym actually mean? So those are a good one. There's a copywriting book called Hey Whipple Squeeze This.
Come
That
again? What's it called?
It's called Hey Whipple Squeeze This, and it's sort of the gold standard for copywriters.
Oh.
I find it valuable because it's really about the advertising industry, but I picked up a lot from it in terms of how to shorten things. I tend to be a little bit long-winded in my first draft, and a lot of times when I'm talking to engineers, software designers in particular, we tend to take a while to we need to set things up. And this book, Sullivan is the author's name. He does a really good job of challenging that and having you ask, why is this 6 words when it can be 3 words? And so that's something that I take personally, because when I'm contracted to write something, when the SME gets it, even that first draft, I just want it to sing for them. You know, they've invested time in it, and so the minute that they read something that is fluffy or unnecessary, I just like that's sort of the worst case scenario for me. Is I would rather have I would rather on my first draft risk getting the technology wrong than presenting something back to them that is unnecessary. So I think that that book's a great resource for challenging you on how much of what you're writing is actually necessary. And then I think the AP Style Guide is great. Grammar Girl is great. It's a website and a blog about all these little things about grammar that we come across in our day-to-day lives that we will think about for a couple of minutes and then just sort of move on. But Grammar Girl does a great job of sort of breaking things down. And it doesn't take a lot of exposure to something like that before you start to pick up on the principles. And so a little investment in learning about sentence structure and why punctuation works the way it does can make you a stronger writer now and in the future. So I think a little bit of that goes a long way. But the Microwave Journal, IEEE publications, those really deep technical journals, I would spend time with, because they know their audience. They know how to talk to an engineering audience. They know what works in a headline and what works in a lead. And they know Microwave Journal is especially good at giving readers a next step. And that's something that I don't leave a sourcing session without knowing what do we want them to do next? Do we want them to go buy something? Do we want them to learn about something? Do we need them to download something? So they never leave a reader hanging. And so there's some really great examples about how to do that.
Well, wonderful resources. And I'll be sure to include links to all of these in our show notes. I'll add one more that I recently started using called Grammarly, and it's a plugin. And so it's just scanning what I'm writing and then offering, a comma should go here or a hyphen or whatever. And similar comment to what you said, the more I've used it, the better I've been at, using punctuation appropriately, and a couple ways that I've been abusing over the years. So that's been a nice shortcut.
As long as we're plugging tools, I've recently discovered Trent, which is a transcription service. It's an AI transcription service. So
right.
A lot of times I will have a sourcing session that sort of goes much longer than I thought it would. And I would encourage any writer to never cut off a sourcing session. So what happens is you'll have a 90-minute sourcing session all of a sudden, and now you have a recording of it, but your notes are a little bit sparse because you were engaged in the conversation. Now transcribing that so that you can start with all of your notes in one place is extremely tedious. And having to undertake such a big project before you even start the writing project itself is a little bit painful. Trent is this AI transcription service that I discovered that is just bananas. It will translate your video or audio file in less time than it took to actually make the recording in the first place. So it's not perfect. You'll get it back, and there'll be some things that are garbled, and it doesn't. But it's 80 or 90% correct, which is great for a writer who has just completed a sourcing session and they want to get right to writing, and they want to go to 45 minutes into the video. My SME said this. I want to get to it and remember what that is. That is probably lately the biggest tool that I've been using, and it's been a little bit of a revelation because it saves me so much time.
And, I'm so excited you found that tool, because we're going to start using it for our podcast to add transcripts. And, with it being that close to perfect, it's not too arduous to just read through it and correct whatever's wrong. So what a wonderful shortcut. Well, Lance, clearly there's a lot that goes into crafting excellent technical content. I'm in awe of you. This is not an easy job. So what do you enjoy most about doing this?
So there's a couple of things that I enjoy that keeps me sort of coming back to this audience. And one is I love working with SMEs. It's just fun to know so many smart people and to help them tell the story that they want to tell. A lot of times when you're talking to them, they want to tell it, they have something on their minds, or they think that the industry needs to know something, but they just haven't been able to articulate it themselves. And so helping them over that hurdle is really rewarding. My favorite thing is when they get something back and they're like, whoa, this sounds just like my company, or it sounds just like me. That's sort of the sign of a project well done. Mm-hmm. The other thing I've enjoyed is just having kind of a front row seat to all the coolest things that are happening. I love hearing about what our clients at TREW are up to. I spent the 4 years before that at Silicon Labs in the chip industry, and sort of was able to see where the Internet of Things was going. And before that, it was National Instruments, and all of these great things that are being tested and measured and made better. So it's sort of the technology and being able to sort of have a insight into that, and then just the people that I've learned, that I've met, are so smart and great to work with.
Awesome. Well, where can our listeners go to find more information to hone their own writing skills? I know you've mentioned quite a few things already. Are any additional resources?
Yeah, so I would go to Grammar Girl, try to find some of these technical journals. Microwave Journal is one of my favorites because they have RF engineering is hard, and they do a really good job of taking complex applications and concepts and making them digestible. IEEE is a good resource. I would bookmark those three right away. And then fortunately, TREW has a resource that we just came out with. So I am working my way through Content Marketing Engineered.
Yay.
And I'm looking forward to getting deeper into that. But there's no shortage of things, resources available to writers. And I think I would start with those. Those are the things that I use the most, that I have bookmarked. So
great. And Lance, you're also a pretty regular blogger on the TREW Marketing site, as well as a few of our other writers. So I think those are great things for people to go look up to.
Yeah, one of the things I like about TREW is that we service our customers, but we also provide a service to the industry itself. So there's a lot of great resources on TREW that are targeted to marketers themselves. So check out TREW Marketing and the resources that we have, and with more to come. There's always great insights into how to write for engineers, how to talk to engineers. So.
Awesome. And I have a pretty exciting announcement to add to that. We are releasing an online training series on the Content Marketing Engineered site, specifically for people developing content targeting technical audiences. It'll release in late July. So we don't have information quite up yet. We're still finalizing the details on it. But if those of you listening would like more information, you just sign up on the website, contentmarketingengineered.com, to be in our mailing list, and we'll make sure you're the first to be in the know when it releases. But again, it'll be late July, and it's going to be a very meaty training course. So super excited about that. Well, Lance, any parting advice for us?
I would say, as a writer, don't be afraid. As a writer developing technical content in particular, don't be afraid to be out of your depth. That's you want to have a working knowledge of what you're working on, but don't think you have to go into a sourcing session with an SME as an expert on their level. Make them unpack it for you, and the better that you do that, the better your end product will be.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Lance.
Thanks.
Visit contentmarketingengineered.com for notes and resources from today's episode. While there, you can subscribe to my blog, which will keep you up to date on new episodes and other resources for building trust and growing your business with technical content. Thanks, and have a great day.